Abraham is obviously one of the most important characters in the Hebrew story, but have you ever thought about his dad? He doesn't get a lot of narrative detail in his story, just a bit of a mention that links Abraham back to the story of Noah. But there are some really interesting little clues along the way that give us perhaps some insight, maybe at least some grounds to speculate into the childhood of Abraham and what he emerges out of as he leaves Ur and heads toward Canaan.
But here, in fact, even this name Terah might suggest that Abraham is being called not just out of Ur, but out of some of those ancient misconceptions of the divine. You see, the name Terah seems to be connected with the Hebrew word for the lunar month. And Sarai is connected with the Akkadian name for the Sumerian consort of the moon god. And if Ur is indeed a reference to the Sumerian city of Ur in Lower Mesopotamia, which was a real city, then we know from archaeological excavations that there was a thriving moon worship scene there as far back as the 3rd century or 3rd millennia BCE. What this means is that the story of Abraham probably emerges from an ancient moon cult. And here's what I want you to pay attention to here. The story that will lead to the reconciliation of all things begins with the surprising intuition of a father who dies thinking the moon directs his steps. Remember, it was Terah that first took the family out of Ur, intending to head toward Canaan, where Abraham would eventually be called to go. And sure, he stops off in Haran, unpacks along the road, and never really gets going again. By the way, that word Haran originally literally meant main road in Assyrian. And honestly, you and I, how many times have we stopped along the road short of our goal and just settled for, what was available? Although, I'm going to give Terah credit here. Over time, that word Haran came to refer to an area about 20 miles from where we think Ur might have been. And eventually, Haran became the center of an Amorite population at one point a few centuries later. So Terah may have actually accidentally founded an ancient city in his lack of ambition. May we all be so complacent. The point is, this is before the Bible, before there are any priests, before there was Israel, before there were any rules or religion or even sacred text to follow. And here is God speaking to moon-worshiping travelers, making wild promises about the future, nudging them to wonder if there might be more to the world than they've been told to expect. If we think, even for a second, that the God of the universe is somehow bound to wait for us, for Christians to get involved before showing up in someone's life, I think we will find ourselves perpetually far behind the story of God. In fact, in my experience, professionally or otherwise, every single time I have thought, even for a second, that I have found myself blessed to be part of offering even just a nudge toward God, what I found inevitably in talking with that person is that in retrospect, when they look back, they can see all the ways that God had always been there all along, gently inviting them home. That's not a bug, that's a feature. That's grace, and sometimes we often only ever notice it looking back. There's lots to mine in this story. That's why we're going to give it 6 weeks. But if we could come out of the story of Abraham, even just with that, trusting that God is present in more ways, in more lives, in more moments than we can possibly even begin to imagine right now, I think we might find ourselves beginning to catch glimpses of the divine, perhaps in the ways we always wished we would have. Sometimes we just have to be open to see it.